you bring up something small. Maybe it's the way they spoke to you in front of other people. Maybe it's something they forgot. Maybe it's your tone of voice. Maybe it's something that hurt you. And before you even finish the sentence, they flip it around. Suddenly, you're the one who overreacted or misunderstood or took everything wrong or made it into a big deal. And now you're having to defend yourself instead of expressing your perspective on whatever it is that happened in the first place. In the end, you leave the conversation feeling confused and maybe even a little bit ashamed. And over time, you start bringing things up because somehow you're always the one at fault. So how do you rescue this situation so that you stop feeling persecuted and gaslighted and start feeling confident and at peace again? Well, let's talk about it. Welcome to the Confident Christian Woman podcast, where we tackle questions about things that have been keeping you stuck in unfulfillment, dissatisfaction, or straight up misery. This is where you'll find the help you need to move forward from confusion, fear, or self-doubt into joy, fulfillment, and peace. This is where we become confident Christian women who not only believe, we obey. Now, let's dive in. Someone recently hit me with this statement. She said, "My husband always blames me and never accepts when he's wrong. It makes me feel like I'm a bad person." So the question we're dealing with today is, what do I do when somebody else makes me feel like I'm always the problem? Maybe for you, it's not a husband. Maybe it's a parent or a sibling or a friend or a colleague even. The common factor is that this person has mastered the art of sneaky blame shifting. And now you feel awful, like you're always the bad guy. Well, I spent almost 10 years of my life in a relationship with a master blame shifter. And for the whole time that I was in that relationship and undergoing being on the receiving end of blame shifting, I didn't at all recognize what was happening, and I certainly did not recognize the deep effect that it was having on my identity. So much so that by the time that relationship chewed me up and spat me out, I was a quivering mass of insecurity who didn't have a clue about who I was anymore. I had not one clue. In fact, I collapsed. I had a friend at the time, and I collapsed on her living room floor, and she asked me, "Who are you?" And I had not even the first clue on how to answer. And it was because I had sacrificed my whole identity at the altar of this relationship. But by the time this relationship was done, I felt like the crud on the bottom of somebody's dirty shoe. And I imagine maybe you feel that way some of the time as well. So we're gonna unearth all of what's going on with you so that you can get back to a place of feeling confident again. But first, let's talk about what's going on with them. That is the person who's doing the blame shifting onto you. Because having a little bit of insight into their behavior can help you to manage your own thoughts and your emotions more effectively. It's not it's not necessary, you don't always have to know what's going on with them, but it can help, okay? And since we're able to dig into that a little bit, we're going to. So, people who cannot admit when they're at fault often feel internally unsafe or insecure when they're wrong, because they make being wrong, they have a story around being wrong, okay? They make it mean something. And so being wrong, when they're wrong, they may feel like they're being exposed, or like they're losing control or losing power, or they may feel like they're being seen as weak, or they may feel like they're being rejected. So instead of tolerating and going through the discomfort of humility and self-examination that comes along with being wrong, or that can come along with being wrong. They avoid that discomfort altogether and they project the issue onto somebody else. So you then become the target of their projection, right? Proverbs 16 verse 18 says, pride goes before destruction. And we tend to think that pride looks boastful and extra, right? Like it's a loud, extra person that's pride. That's how we see pride. But sometimes it doesn't look like that at all. Sometimes pride looks like chronic defensiveness and an inability to admit wrongdoing or to accept responsibility for mistakes or missteps. That's pride too. Meanwhile, when you try to bring something to their attention, you're trying to connect with them, right? And to set things right. And you probably start out confident in your perspective. But after enduring and going through or experiencing enough flipped conversations, and you start rehearsing what you'll say in advance, right? And you start to soften everything with euphemistic language. You start to strategize on how to say what you have to say. Or maybe you even avoid having these discussions because you already know that it's going to end in you being gaslighted. So now in this is the second time that I've used this so far in this episode that I've used this word gaslight. And just in case you're unfamiliar with the word, here's how Merriam-Webster defines it, so that we're all on the same page and we're clear what it means, right? So here's the definition from the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Gaslight means to psychologically manipulate a person, usually over an extended period of time, so that the victim questions the validity of their own thoughts, perceptions of reality, or memories and experiences, and experiences confusion, loss of confidence and self-esteem, and doubts concerning their own emotional or mental stability. That's a mouthful, so back that up and listen again if you need to. And ask yourself if any of that sounds familiar. Surely it felt familiar for me when I was coming out of that relationship where I was on the receiving end of blame shifting all the time, right? So this person gaslights you until over time you shrink yourself to survive conflicts with them, right? In fact, you start suppressing your true perspective, like your honest thoughts. And you start minimizing your feelings and you start to accept their version of things in order to keep the peace. I did that like a pro in that relationship. And in fact, what's happening gradually is that you start training them that you will be the blame carrier in this relationship. That's what you're doing. I don't know if you realize that's what you're doing, but I hope that now I've said it, you realize that is actually what you have been doing. Now, at heart, you desire peace. That's what you really want. But in reality, what you're doing is abandoning yourself. And with that abandonment of yourself comes along issues of self-trust. Because how do you trust somebody who habitually abandons you, right? You don't trust yourself anymore because you're into self-abandonment. And then also that comes with that disconnection from your true self. Because what's happening is that your opinions don't matter. And that all that matters is keeping the perspective, is accepting their perspective so that you don't have to fight about this thing, right? So you lose your identity the way that I did. So this issue of blame shifting is not as surface as you may think it is. It goes to the heart of your identity. It affects your identity. Quick pause. Did someone come to mind as you've been listening? If so, would you share this episode with them? You never know how much they might need it right now. It's a simple way to encourage or inspire someone else. All right, let's jump back into today's episode. So, in all of this, how do you maintain your peace when they are on their side, they're doing everything to wreck it? And how do you get them to stop destroying your confidence and self-esteem with their blame shifting? Well, let's start with a reality check. I have a reality check for you, which is that you can't do anything about their behavior. You just can't. It's a hard truth to swallow, but it's the truth. It's the raw truth. I'm not going to lie to you. You can't do anything about their behavior. They're grown people, which means that they're a grown person, which means that short of domestic violence or physical endangerment to yourself, they have the right to do whatever they want. So if they want to stay stuck in narcissism and insecurity and emotional infancy, that's their choice. They get to choose that, just as you get to choose not to stay in those things. You cannot change them, especially when they have convinced themselves that they're never wrong. You can't change them. Like, that's not a capability that you have. So you trying to get them to take responsibility and admit that actually they're the one at fault will probably not get you anywhere. You'll get nowhere fast with that. You're hitting your head against a brick wall when you do that. Because remember, they're over there trying to protect their identity, because their identity is all tied up with having a self-image of always being right. So they're over there trying to protect this identity that they, in their perception, you're trying to destroy. Okay? So you cannot argue with somebody. You can't argue somebody into self-awareness and emotional growth. You can't do it. Like, you can't just argue them into it. That relationship I was in, my ex tried to argue me into becoming somebody the person he wanted me to be. And I tried to pretend that I was, but no amount of arguing that he put down on his side could get me to actually authentically become that person. So you cannot argue somebody into self-awareness and emotional growth. But what you can do is stop automatically taking on the blame when they try to shift it to you. You can stop doing that. You can also stop defending yourself like you're on trial. You can totally stop doing that. And you can calmly disagree with them and then allow them to be wrong. Did you hear what I just said? That last thing I just said. If your brain tuned out, please tune in again. Tune back into what I'm saying again, because I'm about to repeat it and I really don't want you to miss it, because it's important. This is a game changer. Here's what I said. You can allow them to be wrong, even when you know that you are right. There is no law that says that you have to prove yourself right and prove them wrong. That is your desire for fair play talking. And that's a nice desire to have. And it would be great if every person in the world would own up and confess when they are wrong. And then, if people would do that, we would be able to keep things nice and fair all the time. But that's not reality. Okay? That is not reality. So here are 3 things. I'm about to give you 3 things that you can stop doing right now. Number 1, you can stop wishing for them to admit that they're wrong and apologize. Number 2, you can stop wishing for them to stick to the script that you have for them. That's all those shoulds that you have for them. That's what the script is. And number 3, you can stop wasting your energy fighting a war that you cannot win. You can let go of how you expect them to behave and just let them be wrong. The day, I'm telling you, from my own personal experience of doing this, the day that you start allowing people to just be wrong about you, wrong about themselves, wrong about any issue that would normally rile you up, the day that you just start allowing people to be wrong is the day you take back a whole lot of peace in your life. You'll take back so much peace. Now, I hear you saying, but Chris, that is not okay. How on earth can I let them be wrong when they're shifting the blame to me and making me feel like I'm a bad person? Are you saying I should roll over and just take it? And my answer is no, that's not at all what I'm saying. While you are letting them be wrong, while you're allowing them to be wrong, you don't have to stew over how unfair all of it is. You don't have to let yourself feel persecuted. You don't have to allow yourself to feel any of that. Maybe one day I'll talk about, I'll go deeper into thoughts and emotions. But for now, I'm just saying to you that you do not have to allow any of that. You don't have to let yourself feel persecuted, and you don't have to let yourself be all up in arms about how unfair all of it is. When this person gaslights you, when you accept their blame, you get into the habit of being their victim. And every time you do that, there's a story running in your head and it sounds something like this. Here we go again. They're blaming me for everything. Why am I always at fault and they're never wrong? This is so unfair. It's not right and they need to stop doing this to me. And they have totally ruined my day by acting like a jerk again. And when you go through all of that, whether it's these exact thoughts or some other ones that you're having, when you put yourself into the role of victim, you have given away your emotional power. And that feels terrible. I'm sure that feels terrible because I know when I was doing that, it felt awful. Instead of doing that, you can corral your thoughts into a more empowering, better feeling, self-supportive story that may sound something like this. And it's just an example. Your story can sound any way you want it to, right? But it's just an example because this is how I operate now. My story would go something like, wow, would you look at that? They're trying to turn this whole thing around on me again. It could not be clearer that they're at fault, but they're not willing to admit it. It must really suck to be so insecure and stuck in your ego that you refuse to grow through your mistakes. That's actually kind of sad. And then you just let them be wrong. Because when you let them be wrong, you do not let them get under your skin. You keep your power and you maintain your peace. And you may even end up feeling compassion for them. Yeah, that's possible. No, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that you should subject yourself to emotional abuse from anybody. Okay, because while you're maintaining your peace and in the middle of their blame shifting, you also need to decide if this is the type of relationship you want for yourself. So we're going to take this in two parts. First, let's talk about when you are not married to the blame shifter in your life. Maybe it's a boyfriend or a friend or a parent or a sibling. Okay, and then once we talk about that, then we'll talk about an approach you can use if you're married to the blame shifter. All right, so first, here are a few questions that you can ask yourself if you're not married to the person, okay? Not married. Okay, here we go. What type of people do I want to be in the inner circle of my life? And I mean, when you answer that question, like, be very specific. Be very specific. Next question. What qualities do I value in the people who I let into my inner circle? Again, be specific. Which of these qualities are the most important to me for them to have? And then ask yourself similar questions about this current blame shifting relationship that you're in so that you can see where the biggest differences lie, okay? Then once you uncover those differences, then you can decide how you can bridge the gaps that you see without requiring the other person to change. Or even if you can even decide if you want to bridge those gaps at all. Like maybe you decide, you know what, I don't think it's worth it. I don't even want to try to bridge this gap. Okay? Or you can decide, okay, here's knowing that I can't change this person, how do I want to bridge these gaps? If this relationship is worth keeping in the position in my life that it currently has. All right, and then you go. Once you've done that, then you want to get with God and ask Him for a vision of the types of relationships that He wants to bring into your life and how He may want you to make room for those relationships. All right, so that's if you're not married to the person. Now let's talk about if you are married to this type of controlling, blame-shifting person. All right, if you are, then you can do the same exercise, right? Use the same types of questions, the same questions that I just went through, but add one more question to the list for yourself to answer, okay? For you to answer for yourself. And that question is, what kind of wife do I want to be? If you're a man, what kind of husband do I want to be? Okay? You can even use this question even if it's not a marital relationship. What kind of daughter do I want to be? What kind of friend do I want to be? And then you can answer this question by listing the qualities that you want to have in this relationship, in this marriage. For example, in my marriage, I want to be slow to anger and quick to forgive. I want to be kind and generous with my love. I want to feel confident in my relationship. And your confidence doesn't come from them. Maybe there's an episode on true confidence. You can even do your own Bible study on what it means to be a godly wife or a good friend, if that is where you're at. Then focus on showing up as the wife and the woman that God is calling you to be, even in a blame-shifting relationship. Now, a couple of more really helpful questions for you to reflect on and answer are whether this is a marriage or, whatever type of relationship this is. Here are a few more questions that you can reflect on. What do I believe will happen if I stop absorbing the blame in this relationship? What am I afraid will happen if I stop absorbing the blame in this relationship? Where did I learn that keeping peace requires me accepting the blame? What is actually my blame to accept and own, and what isn't? Okay, now looking back now on that 10-year relationship that I was in, I can look back now and see how very obviously toxic it was, but I didn't see it back then. It was like very toxic. That relationship was so toxic, but I couldn't see it then, right? Back then, I bought the lie that my partner at the time was shoving down my throat. I swallowed it, hook, line, and sinker, that I was always the problem. Because he had me very well trained to accept the blame. And I did that until my self-esteem and self-image were in the garbage. On top of that, back then, I didn't have the tools or the confidence to handle the situation in ways where I didn't end up feeling like roadkill, right? Like I'd just gotten run over. But you do. You now have tools to handle this. I've just given you some. You are not a bad person because someone else does not yet have the capacity to accept responsibility for their own faults and wrong actions. You're not a bad person because they lack that capacity at this point. You can let them be wrong without letting their slyness and their poison and their desire for control infect your identity. You can choose how you see their blame shifting, and you can stop being their victim and the villain in their story. In the end, you cannot control them the way that they're trying to control you, and you cannot force them to stop blaming you for everything. But you can control your own mind so that you keep your peace and your power and your confidence. Will you? Thanks for tuning in today. Before you go, can I ask a small favor? If this episode encouraged or inspired you, would you please take a moment to leave a quick rating and review? It helps other women find the podcast and start getting unstuck, just like you have. Thanks for being a rock star.